Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I want to talk about something a little bit different, maybe somewhat oblique than what you're accustomed to seeing me talk about. And as far as things pertaining to astrology, what I want to talk about is the fact that first, is there a perfect chart or a perfect natal chart someone could have, and if not, what's the ideal chart? Well, let me start off by saying I don't really believe there's any infallible or perfect chart. There may be a chart that may be a lot more favorable than someone else's, but I don't know if there's any chart that has perfection. Now, let's start off by saying perhaps to a lot of people in their perception, and I would agree with this, that an ideal natal chart for someone to have would have an even distribution. I would think of planets above the horizon, below the horizon, planets in feminine and masculine signs, perhaps a balance of planets on the left and right side of the chart, which would indicate maybe a good balance between self-reliance and independence, and knowing when maybe to ask for help and be dependent on someone, even if it's on occasion for something, if you feel you can't do whatever it is yourself on occasion, and being able to humble yourself in doing so. But to me, I don't know if there's really not many people that are going to have those kind of charts, and I think the key is to accentuate and emphasize the positive elements in one chart, or in someone's chart. Now, and another thing, part of an ideal chart would be one that would have also perhaps mainly positive aspects, say auspicious ones like majority of aspects and trines and sextiles, and maybe actually have a few squares and or oppositions, because if somebody has a chart, say, that is like all sextiles in trines, and there's no inconjunct squares, oppositions, it could be somebody that kind of can maybe succumb to complacency. It could indicate the person being lackadaisical at times, due to the fact if you don't have any challenges or any kind of obstructions or obstacles, the person might take their abilities for granted and might not always have that sense of urgency to get better and continue to develop them. So at the same time, I have a very bad aspect in my chart, and it's important to try to work through them. I have, as many of you know, I've talked about having Venus square Saturn in my natal horoscope, and that placement is obviously not very good. Now, there are some very bad aspects, of course, which are tough to work through, but if you have certain a lot of positive aspects, or some that'll help alleviate that. Like, say if somebody like me has Saturn in square or opposition Venus, and they have some positive aspects to Venus and or Saturn, that would help alleviate some of the tension and stress associated with that aspect. But the key is to accentuate the positive in your chart. Even if somebody, quote unquote, has a chart that has predominantly negative aspects, and they have like either all their planets below the horizon, say, or almost all of them below the horizon, and all of them in introverted signs, that's undoubtedly there's going to be something positive. Somebody that has a chart like that could very well have, for example, let's say they had the moon in Cancer. That would be in the moon's natural dignity or rulership. It would be in the natural sign that it rules. So there's obviously, sometimes you just have to really look for the positive in your chart and try to emphasize it the best you can. And knowing negative elements in a horoscope is half the battle right there. If you have a fundamental grasp and understanding of the subject of astrology, then you understand what the negative aspects mean, and you can work through them. Also, if many of you, I'm sure, know about progressions and transits in your chart, and those, just because someone has a quote-unquote negative chart doesn't mean that they can't be assisted by progressions and by transits. Somebody that has, say, an adversely aspected or afflicted Jupiter in their chart, if Jupiter, transiting Jupiter, say conjuncts their Venus, that could be an auspicious time for perhaps money and or love and romantic things. So also, if somebody, say, let's say in a progressed chart, somebody had they have Jupiter making a square to a planet. Now, what could happen is by progression, that it could at some point maybe move away from that square, even though it would still stay in that aspect natally in your natal horoscope. By progression, it will at some point it'll move away, especially if you have like Jupiter in a negative aspect to a personal planet. The personal planet is going to move fairly quickly and will at some point get out of that aspect as far as the progression goes. So the reality is we have all signs exerting signs and planets and signs exerting positive and negative attributes and energy. And even if somebody, say, has, like in my chart, I have 8 of my 10 planets below the horizon. I have Chiron and Saturn in the 12th house. And this makes me, I believe, exceptionally introverted person. Now, knowing this is part of the battle, it can give me maybe an inclination to maybe be a little more gregarious. At the same time, it's kind of hard to just transform and come out of what you're accustomed to being. Now, to some degree, I'm actually happy with as far as my demeanor and as far as being a fairly introverted person, because I'm not like a super people person anyway, and I feel a lot of times more comfortable in the confines of my home and in the privacy that is associated with it. So I guess what I'm saying is something that's negative could be subjective as well. Somebody that has a lot of planets that are, say they have a preponderance of planets in the top half of their chart through houses 7 through 12. Now, this could be somebody, obviously, that can be very gregarious and extroverted and outgoing. Now, but at the same time, a person that has a lot of those planets, energies, or what have you in the top half of their chart, they may have some kind of difficulty maybe having a private life due to the fact that they don't have many planets or energies below the horizon, and there might be some inward or some feeling inside that this person feels deprived of having maybe their privacy to some degree. And so there's really, like I said, even superficially, if a chart looks like it's so phenomenal or exceptional or what have you, a lot of times it really isn't, and it depends on how the people how they are responsive to these energies. And what I mean when I say this is, does the person really like constantly being around people, or is the person okay maybe being introverted? Now, in most cases, I think they would be, because a lot of planets below the horizon would indicate more of that need for introversion, and the antithesis would be true for the planets on the top half of the chart. But there might be some people on occasion that might have that need. Let's say the person with the extroverted chart might have that need for privacy and has a hard time getting it, and just the opposite could be true for that person with the planets below the horizon. Even if they feel strongly introverted and they're somewhat reclusive, it might be part of them that wishes they might have a little bit more in terms of maybe more people in their life, for example. So it just comes down to what you really about maybe just dealing with the energies in the best way that you can, and using them in the most positive manner. Now, as far as, like, say you take a chart pattern, let's take somebody that has like a splash chart. Now that's usually well, splash chart is generally, it's going to be planets that are fairly evenly dispersed in the horoscope, and I believe it would be your 10 planets would occupy no less than 8 houses. So obviously this could be somebody that's a very diversified or versatile person, or somebody that might maybe dissipate his or herself through lack of unifying purpose. So there are good and bad with that. Just like somebody, let's say, that has a bowl heart, I guess a bowl configuration as far as their chart pattern. That could be somebody that has certain concentration of power, but at the same time they might limit their energies to as far as where the houses that are occupied. I have a bowl pattern in my chart. I have it from, or at least you could say it would be kind of a long bowl pattern, because the opposition to the planets at the rims of the bowl, I think it falls a little bit out of the orb, but what it indicates is that my concentration of power, so to speak, and my energies are more as far as in things in seclusion and privacy. So it's kind of like it can indicate some single-mindedness, but it's more by myself as opposed to maybe things that are connected more with other people. So there's always some positive and negative in most things in a chart. And somebody, let's say, has let's take a configuration in a person's chart. If somebody has like a fixed T-square in their chart, and as most of you know, that's when you have an opposition between 2 planets that are fixed, or the ascendant or midheaven, but it won't include it won't be both. You can't have the ascendant and midheaven in it, but you could have one or the other. So if you have a fixed T-square, you would have the opposition between the energies, and you would have another planet that would square both of those planets, so making the T formation, so to speak. Now, that person can, on the negative side, can be somewhat intractable, intransigent, somebody that doesn't want to waver strongly from their points of view. But it could also give, as I stated before, with the concentration of power, the persistence, the single-mindedness. So you're going to have that as well. So people, I'm just going to close it once again in summation. It's about just accepting things in your chart, and remember, as I've stated in all my videos, essentially, that the stars may impel, they don't compel, and you do have your free will, and that does factor in as well. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for as far as charts, not anyone having a perfect astrology or natal chart. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.